So you probably saw this over the weekend where the media, and it actually started with the Washington Post, started spreading all these articles about how the Bernie Sanders campaign is not actually paying its staff $15 an hour. They're paying its staff under $15 an hour, which they're, and of course the media was quick. Oh, how hypocritical! What's going on there? They're not paying their staff what they say they're supposed to pay their staff. Bernie Sanders responded to this, and so what headline came next? Well, here's a headline from Fox News today. Bernie Sanders campaigns announces it will cut hours to pay staffers $15 an hour minimum wage, prompting mockery. That's the headline from Fox News. So the corporate media narrative that's going around right now, Bernie Sanders wasn't paying his staff $15 an hour. He was paying them less than that. He got called out for it, so they said, well, we're going to cut your hours so that you can get paid $15 an hour, so that it equals about $15 an hour. Okay. What actually happened? Is that actually what went down? You might be surprised to find out that, no, that was a corporate media hit job once again. That was information distorted and misrepresented. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it seems like they did it on purpose. It seems like they got this so ridiculously wrong that it's hard for me to come to the conclusion that this was just a journalistic error. All right, so let's start at the beginning. What really was going on this weekend? All right. So here is a screenshot of what's really going on. The truth of minimum wage fake news spreading. In May, the Bernie campaign and union came to an agreement that all field organizers will have an annual salary of $36,000 instead of an hourly salary. This salary was based on 5 days a week of work, 40 hours. On an hourly base salary, this would have been $17 an hour. In that same month, Bernie's campaign manager made a proposition to the union to change the 5-day agreement to a 6-day agreement with a hike of a $42,000 annual salary. The union rejected this proposal as the raise would have elevated field staff to a pay level responsible for paying more of their own health care costs. This is because Bernie campaign pays all premiums for salaried employees making $36,000 or less per year. Those making more are covered at a rate of 85%. On July 11th, only 8 days before this WAPO report, some field officers raised the concern in staff Slack channel that even though the initial agreement was 40 hours a week, they are now working about 60 hours a week, and by 60 hours estimate, their annual pay of $36,000 will only be $13 an hour. Faze replied that instead of direct talks, talk through the union, which is standard procedure. The union is preparing a new proposal, which has not yet been submitted for Faze, and WAPO got access to this. In the draft of that proposal, they are asking for $46,800 for field organizers and $62,400 for regional field directors. The draft also asked the campaign to cover 100% of healthcare costs. There is no information that the campaign has ever rejected any union proposal. So in other words, what does this mean? In other words, the Bernie Sanders campaign is unionized, and they're doing exactly what a union does. This was the initial agreement, which, by the way, initial agreement, $17 an hour. So what's changing? Well, they're finding out they need to work more. They're finding out there's more for them to do. Why are they working more? Why is there more for them to do? I don't know. One reason might be because they're not only running a campaign, they're also facing up against the Democratic establishment and the corporate media. Maybe they're having to work more because the corporate media does smear job hit pieces on Bernie on a near daily basis. And by the way, this is freaking one of them. So that's what's actually happened. The real headline here is, hey, Bernie Sanders campaign has a union, and they're doing exactly what a union is supposed to do. And the campaign is responding exactly how a campaign is supposed to respond to a union. Hey, here's the deal. You get it ends up being $17 an hour. Great. Time goes on. Hey, this deal's not working. A campaign is a very, very ever-moving process. A campaign, there's a timeline. There is a window of opportunity. It changes. And I'll tell you what, I've never been a staffer myself on a campaign. It's not something I'm looking to do. It's not for me. And when I say campaign, I'm referring to a candidate. I have done campaigns for causes. I've worked on a net neutrality campaign. So I know some about the anatomy of a campaign. I've never been a campaign for a candidate. That's what I meant by that statement. But I do know some friends that have, some friends that went into politics. They worked on campaigns for different individuals. And, it's one of those things where you work until, and you just get whatever your pay that was agreed upon. If you're getting hourly, you get hourly. But if you have a salary, which I know folks, they've done it on salary, they work until the work is done, and they just get paid that salary. They don't have a union to negotiate them, or they didn't have a union to negotiate for them. They didn't get to complain. They didn't get to say they were working too much. They just had to put the hours in and get the job done because it was campaign season, and they had an election to win. So here you actually have a campaign that has a union, that has union protections. So the only headline here, there should be no headline here because this is just standard procedure. This is just how it works. Wouldn't you expect something like this in a campaign? Like, hey, it turns out we're working more. We have to negotiate again. Okay, let's talk about it. That's what a union is for. That's why a union exists. They're doing what a union's supposed to do. And the campaign's responding. They're responding the way a higher up's supposed to respond. Hey, talk to the union. Let's figure this out, and we're gonna get to the negotiating table soon. So there you go. That's how over the weekend, all that talk about they don't actually get $15 an hour, that was faulty information at best and deliberately deceptive information. So as far as today is concerned, with the whole, Bernie said they're going to cut people's hours. What really happened there? All right, we're going to go. We're going to go there and find out. So here's the article that they're pulling that from. That Bernie said, okay, well, to make sure they get $15 an hour, we're just going to cut their hours. Here's what really happened there. Bernie Sanders defends staff compensation after complaints his staff isn't being paid $15 an hour. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders defended his campaign compensation package Friday after a Washington Post story highlighted concerns among staffers that they were not receiving the $15 an hour wages. All right, so here's what Bernie said. I'm very proud to be the first presidential candidate to recognize a union and negotiate a union contract. And that contract was ratified by the employees of the campaign. And it not only provides pay of at least $15 an hour, it also provides, I think, the best healthcare benefits that any employer can provide for our field organizers. So he was disappointed that some folks went to the press instead of just handling it via the union. And how this all initially leaked, I don't know. All right, so here's something that we already talked about. Basically, it comes out to being $17 an hour, but they're saying that they've been having to work more than that. So here's the big part of the article that Fox News took and ran. For a staffer working 40 hours a week, that comes out to about $17 an hour. But 40-hour work weeks on presidential campaigns are rare. Sanders said that the campaign will limit the number of hours staffers work to 42 or 43 each week to ensure they're making the equivalent of $15 an hour. So this is the paragraph that Fox News kind of took and ran with. Now, again, let's take this paragraph in context. What's going on right now? The unions are negotiating. The union and the people overseeing the campaign are negotiating. They're trying to figure shit out. They're trying to come to an agreement. So in the meantime, Bernie Sanders is telling folks, hey, don't work to the point where you're getting less than $15 an hour. I know there's a lot to be done because we're dealing with bullshit like this all the time. So in other words, during a negotiation, Bernie Sanders in the campaign is trying to assure that workers get at least $15 an hour. So they're saying, hey, don't go over 42, 43 hours a week. And we're working to figure this out. Maybe everyone's going to decide, hey, we need to go full throttle here. We need to go 60 hours a week to get this thing to the finish line, and we're willing to do it because we want to win. So you see how Fox News just cherry-picked that little sentiment completely didn't represent the overall context of what was going on and saying, yeah, he's telling people work less so we can get work less. So it ends up being like $15 an hour. Now people are mocking him. They're making it out like this is just about, oh, we don't want to increase salaries. No, it's not about that. It's about rolling with the punches that a campaign is inevitably going to give. And the Bernie Sanders campaign, unlike other campaigns, has things in place to actually help workers and protect workers. That's something other campaigns don't have. The Bernie Sanders campaign actually has it. And somehow, through straight up distortion of information, the corporate media has figured out a way to somehow use that to smear Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is not perfect. There are plenty of valid criticisms of Bernie Sanders. There are plenty. But you don't really hear them from the corporate media, do you? I mean, in a very sad way, it's actually impressive that they are such amazing propagandists. They were somehow able to spin this. And it wasn't just Fox News, by the way. The Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness, they're doing their role to help. They led the way. Washington Post. What's something that Bernie Sanders did? He had an act called Stop Bezos, which was a living wage act, which called out Jeff Bezos individually. What does Jeff Bezos own? The Washington Post. Is it making sense now? Is it adding up now? So the real headline should be, hey, because Bernie Sanders has a union, they actually don't have to worry about being overworked to the point where they're not making a decent hourly wage. They get to negotiate that. They get to figure out solutions. And while they're negotiating it, in the meantime, no one's going to make less than $15 an hour. They're going to make sure. They're going to say, don't work to the point where you're making less than that. Which, by the way, they still get a decent full-time salary, by the way. It's not like he's saying, oh, work 10 hours a week. No, you're still working over 40 hours a week. He's just saying, don't go more than that because we want to make sure you get $15 an hour. And in the meantime, we're negotiating to figure out a long-term solution for this. This is a total standard and healthy procedure. And the corporate media is distorting it to try to make the Sanders campaign look bad. That's just straight up deliberative, deceptive propaganda. That's all that is. And it's spawned from the Washington Post, whose owner Bernie has criticized and is trying to get to pay living wages. Interesting, huh?
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to